to this. I have to notify first of all that this recording is being recorded. So if you don't like it, you should take action. So welcome to this session on community-owned virtual power plants, lessons from a maturing concept. This session will explore what virtual power plants can do for energy communities. And it will present some available tools and share experiences from communities that have been exploring this topic. Following a brief introduction, some on the aspects covered by, my text is going away all the time, by the REScoop.eu network. Participants will have time to ask and discuss their questions with experts on the topics. So we have 4 speakers here at the session. First of all, we have, one moment, I have a problem. We have Roland Tual, he's a project manager of REScoop.eu. We have Luc Meskes, he's active at Energent in the city of Ghent in Belgium. We have Vincent Dirks, he's from Energy Ideals from Belgium. And we have Laura van den Berge of the Technical University of Eindhoven. The project, this session is powered by 2 projects. It's the REScoop VPP project that received funding from the Horizon 2020 research program, and also by Interreg Northwest Europe, the ECHO project, which in its capitalization got the opportunity to team up with another Interreg Northwestern Europe project, which is called Community Virtual Power Plant, CVPP, so that the groups, the ECHO groups, could learn from what was going on in the Interreg REScoop Community Virtual Power Plant project. Next slide. So we will first have 10 minutes of presentation of each speaker present. And then we will have a panel discussion of 20 minutes. We have some questions prepared for the speakers. And then there will be 15 minutes of Q&A where you as an audience can interact with the speakers. And I will try to make some conclusions at the end. So don't waste time. Let's start with Roland with the first presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here and to introduce quickly the concept of VPPs. We've proposed a masterclass on the topic, but we've not required any level. So we'll try to start from scratch and bring everybody to the level with this short presentation. So what I propose to introduce you to is a bit of very brief context on infrastructure for beginners, talk about the new landscape of energy services, then what happened in the last years regarding regulatory changes at European level that is now being transposed in the rest of Europe. And finally, introduce you to the holonic energy system and what it means for energy cooperatives. Okay, let's start. So as I mentioned, the energy landscape is knowing a bit of changes. We all know about it, but I'll try to put some big trends on it so we understand where the concept of VPPs comes from and especially what we can do now with digital energy services as cooperatives. So just for the term, virtual power plants is quite specific. It came, I think, in the early 2000s in Europe in the context of privatization or liberalization of the energy system, together with the growing share of renewable energy in the sector, and also with the help of digitalization tool. What has happened is when traders had to trade renewable resources. They had to trade them according to the shape required by the energy platform, the European energy platform, which require you to broad a given amount of resource with a ramping up period, ramping down, and so on and so forth. But variable resources are not so fit for such an exercise, and the solution was to pool resources from different sources like wind, solar, which are variable, together with hydro or cogeneration, which are not, and pool them so they can match the requirement of the energy platforms. So this is, in a nutshell, where the concept of virtual power plant come from, but it doesn't stop here. And I'll go now into the depth of the digitalization of the energy system in less than 10 minutes. So, well, as we are all aware, production technologies are changing mostly from fossil to renewables, so from centralized to decentralized energy, which has an impact on markets now that the energy sector has been liberalized. So more cross-border markets, but also more decentralized energy market. This has also impacts on the infrastructure led by or managed by system operators. So new assets, so new connections and constraints on the infrastructure, but also new flows. Especially the distribution level of the electricity grid used to be just one way. Now most of the renewables are being connected at distributed level, which means that DSOs have to handle two ways flows on their sector, on their grid. And so finally, we now attend a changing role in the role of end users from passive to more active, and we'll see how. So the role of the demand side, and that can be understood as both loads, but also on-site generation with panels, with any resources at distributed level, can be to adapt their consumption to the availability of renewable energy. And this can take place through a retailer or whatever, like conventional player, but also from a self-consumption point of view, just adapting to generation from your roof. Second aspect is the quality of electricity. Now with all these different resources, the quality in terms of hertz or voltage may change rapidly, and new contribution are needed. And this is through aggregator or directly, but in the case of smaller player, it's through aggregator, a role that can be played by the demand side. And finally, as I said, constraint on the grid means that consumers or distributed players can also play a role by shifting their consumption or their generation to optimize and avoid congestions. So that's a new energy landscape that we're now seeing, with more and more contracts, market exchanges, new actors at the distributed level. Quick introduction on laws. There are three topics I want to talk about: energy communities, renewable self-consumption, and aggregation, because they are mainly how this was translated into EU law. One point to say that energy communities is not about a special type of activity, but about how you do it. So you do it with a legal entity that's based on open and voluntary participation that is controlled by its members. These members are natural persons, SMEs, or local authorities, and the primary purpose should not be to make financial benefits, but to have environmental, economic, or social community benefits as a main purpose. And finally, renewable energy community which is a mirror concept in another directive, has two additional requirements, but which related to autonomy and proximity of renewable energy projects. All this to tell you that energy communities is basically about making new entrants, and especially the civil society, come into the energy sector, and not about a specific activity. Innovative service are better illustrated by self-consumption, which was both introduced in the Renewable Energy Directive and in the Internal Electricity Market Directive. For the details, you have here a couple of a summary of what is meant by this. This was completed with aspects related to collective self-consumptions in both cases, and also energy sharing, which is specific to energy community, but can be understood as a right to collective self-consumption for communities. And finally, aggregation is defined also. So this is maybe the core of what is being understood by VPPs, combining multiple customer loads or generated electricity for sale, purchase or auction in an electricity market. This is also introduced in the recent clean energy package. And now users have a right to aggregation. Okay, so just illustrating these things, what it means in terms of new services. Well, possibility for self-consumption, aggregation, or aggregation for grid services, also known as demand response. So this means for a BRP, BRP retailer to purchase on cheapest hours and minimizing imbalances. This is made possible by enabling customers to change their time of consumption. So the more the incentives are strong or direct automation, for example, this would enable BRP retailer to optimize its own portfolio, and with the benefits of consuming green energy real time, with the expectation that more and more renewables will reach out to the European market, which will also mean that this energy will be cheaper. What is rare, what is scarce is expensive, what is abundant should be cheap. Self-consumption is pretty straightforward, but digital energy services can also help this out by automating some appliances and make sure that you consume when the sun is shining on your roof. Benefits are pretty straightforward. I think they are the same than the previous ones. And finally, aggregation for grid services, which means supporting RES integration. Exactly how I mentioned it in the introduction, to help with the quality of energy or to help with congestions at the at both grid levels, actually. So this is a complete picture. I will just highlight how this can be integrated to reach out to a multi-layer optimization, which is really, I think, the core of what cooperative can support as a model and what we are working on. So first, you have optimization at the local level, and this is related to self-consumption, either at the individual level, but more and more at a collective level. Then the BRP retailer may complete and further optimize given on its own portfolio, which means given like the wind turbine parks that he may own on other resources that he may own, to make sure that everything fits within its portfolio and its renewable energy resources. And finally, once this community aspects are solved, we can go to aggregation and support system operators in handling the grid. And this is how you perform multi-level optimization. Congratulations. Hope this helped you. And I'm passing the floor to my colleague, Luc, who will introduce you to his experience in Ghent. Luc, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I hope you hear me well. I'm Luc Meskes. I'm General Coordinator of Ghent. Ghent is a citizens energy cooperative. Maybe we can go to the next slide. I don't know who's passing by the slides. Are you, Roland? Or? Okay, yeah. So we are active in the city of Ghent and in the province of East Flanders. We have three types of activities as a cooperative. We realize investments in renewables, solar, wind and heat projects. We also organize all kinds of services to our members, but also to the general citizens in the province, especially energy efficiency measures. We organize group purchase to make it life easier for people who want to buy solar panels or who want to improve energy efficiency of their dwellings. We organize energy scans and coachings, and then we're also active in several innovation projects, such as the CVPP project, which I will explain a little bit more. The REScoop VPP project Roland explained. We also did a project about hybrid heat pumps, and we had and have a project together with the city of Ghent, which is called Duurzame Stroom, where we it's a more social approach where we try to find measures or way how to take along all kind of classes of society in the energy transition that we're working on. Okay, next slide. The experience I want to share is about the CVPP project. CVPP is Community Virtual Power Plant project that was funded by Interreg. It was initiated in 2017 and will finalize this year in June. It was the first phase was a 3-year that we really set up a pilot and built the CVPP. The last 2 years was a capitalization phase where we put more attention in sharing the lessons learned towards other energy communities. The partners in this project, the project was coordinated and managed by a Technical University of Eindhoven. And we had 3 pilots, one in Ireland by Community Power and Tipperary County. We had a second pilot in Loenen, and I will share some slides as well of their experiences. They work together with the city of Apeldoorn. And then here in Ghent, Ghent organized the third pilot. So the 3 pilots, they all had a different angle how to look and experiment with the CVPP concept. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This is a little bit an example. This is the core or the heart of the neighborhoods we have been working on the CVPP project. Our angle of the CVPP project was a socio-economic CVPP. It's an existing residential area with old houses with a big mixture of societal groups. We have a lot of migrants, we have poor people, we have house owners, we have renters, etc. So one of the main challenges was to look to find ways how do we engage all those different groups of society in such type of project. How do we engage them, or can we find ways to increase renewables, especially solar? First step is solar, then you can also look to renewable heat production, but that's still more complicated and more expensive here in our Flemish context. So we started with solar. The different dots you see are a little bit the different results that we achieved. So the blue dots are all the people who put during the project put solar panels on their own roof, and they invested themselves. The green dots are bigger solar plants that Energent as cooperative organized as an investment. It's a third-party investment scheme. The yellow dots, this as well, we organized through a leasing contract solar systems with home batteries, and you see that they are organized in two specific streets. This was very specific that we reached out to those people to organize it in that way, because we wanted to organize some tests with the batteries towards the local grid. So we want to be sure that all those batteries were connected to the same feeder cable of the TSO. Then the green one, we experimented towards renters with solar panels by a leasing contract. The other ones are minor. So this gives a little bit a view of the results of the projects in this area, in an existing residential neighborhood, how to start working with CVPP concept. Then can go to the next slide. So in a CVPP, you engage people, you need to establish renewable production, and then you need an energy management system to collect the data, to visualize the data, and to organize some steering, some management of demand based on the production that you generated. So for us in the project, 2017, 2018, was quite early. We didn't know what kind of direction this kind of energy management would go to. We didn't have a clue of which kind of business opportunity in the future this would possibly bring. So we decided, we had some young companies in Flanders who were experimented with energy management systems, but they all wanted to sell us, like a kind of black box, which would do what we required it to do during the project. But then if the project is finished, you stay there with your black box. You don't have access to the knowledge and the IT development. And probably a lot of changes still needed to go on. So we decided to look for another solution, which was open source based with a low cost hardware. So we ended up discussing with Energy ID. So Vincent will continue the next presentation. To work with a low-cost Raspberry Pi and to build the whole system based on open source Home Assistant platform. In order to organize the most possible flexibility towards the future, and not to organize a lock-in for us as energy community to contract one company that would have all the knowledge and that we would be obliged in the future to continue working always with the same company in continuing developing this kind of EMS system. So that was the first version, and out of this experience, the REScoop VPP project grew, which will be explained later on in the session. So all kind of components were connected. The communications was set up with some solar inverters, with some energy measurement devices such as Fluxo. We had a smart plug, etc. It was the first version, so we limited very hard the type of equipment that we wanted to connect to, not to complicate things too much in the first phase. So we limited to, we only installed SMA inverters, we only installed one type of battery, etc. And in the following step, we installed one type of heat pump. Okay, I have to go quicker, it seems. Okay, next slide. Some results. We had an algorithm developed being peak absorption, where we blocked the battery in order to absorb the peak production of the solar. You see it on the right hand side, blocking of the battery and absorption of the peak, while in the first slide on the left, you see that a part of the peak is injected in the grid. The next slide, you see the integration of a hybrid heat pump, where above you see the red line where you have the power consumption of the heat pump in the evening when there is heat demand, while during the day, the purple line, you have the production of the solar panels. And this was shifted. We installed the hybrid heat pump with a thermal battery. So in the slide below, you see that the consumption, electric consumption of the heat pump is shifted towards noon when we have the solar production. The next slide, we also had an algorithm developed to organize collective autoconsumption, where we can actually organize a virtual neighborhood battery. So all the individual batteries were aggregated, and we can send surplus solar power towards the batteries that still have some capacity. On the next slides, we will put this in another example. Here you see a park where actually we started this week in building here in a new housing development, a low temperature heat network based on geothermal heat pumps. So we will have a 300 kilowatt heat pump here, but we don't have any means to organize solar energy production here. But in the back, you see two schools, and on the schools, we have a 140 kilowatt peak of PV production organized. So we will use this forecast production of the PV on the school at the time that, because we inject a lot of the solar production in the grid, we will use this forecast actually to organize the thermal buffer of the heat network here in the housing development that we're building just on the plot besides it. Next slide then, something about policy. If you follow the transposition tracker of REScoop.eu, then you can see that actually Belgium is a quite good practice. We actually legally translated very well the EU directive. But this doesn't mean that we have a very good business case. We're still, the translation seems to be good, technically, juridically, but it doesn't mean that you have viable business cases. We're quite struggling to find good business cases in the Flemish context, even we have a good translation. What do we see, next slide, as potential business cases? That, yeah, self-consumption, it's easy, that's normal. But also collective self-consumption, if they might change a little bit the Flemish framework to improve this, then there will be some potential. And they're also introducing a capacity tariff in Flanders. So there also the CVPP concept might help to reduce the cost of the people, of the residents of the province in the capacity tariff. So there is some potential as well. And then to end with, I will share another 4 slides of our colleagues in Loenen. They worked with IT group to develop and implement their EMS system. So they're more or less obliged to continue with this IT partner for further developments as well. And they're pushing them to the future developments to organize them on an open source basis as much as possible as well. but they have a harder way doing it. So here you have an example of a heat pump that was connected and organized also based on the solar production. On the next slide, you can see they also included forecast of dynamic prices. So they have 1 day ahead, they have the forecast of the electricity price. So people get signals and they can organize themselves, the people who have a contract with the dynamic prices. The next slide, you see an example where this person charged his EV car during the night based on the forecast of the electricity that would be for the energy component was at €0. And next and the last slide, you can see that actually here with the forecast of the solar production, you see that this person managed to charge his EV, and I think he also has a heat pump that he organized all his consumption during the solar production. So this gives a little bit an idea of the EMS system, at least the visualization of the people of Lunen in the CVPP project. And this is the end of my presentation. So now I give the word to Vincent.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Vincent Dirks. I'm the co-founder of Energy ID. And we are with Energy ID, we're a cooperative, an IT cooperative with social finality. And our social goal is to build IT tools to support the energy transition. So we have a platform, Energy ID, to give people a place for monitoring their energy. And we got involved, like Luc was telling, in this more advanced smart home controller, let's say, projects. And I want to show you today where we are with a project called REScoop VPP. And to give you some background, so we started with Energent on this journey. How can we build for a low cost in that time something that has potential to grow? And of course, we cannot do it alone. We did it with some partners in Flanders, but at the same time, we were also discussing with a lot of other cooperatives, and REScoop.eu gives us an opportunity to talk with all different cooperatives around Europe. We started talking, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are the goals we have all in common? And so quickly we saw that we as Energy ID alone, we cannot build such a tough technological system. We met Carbon Coop, for instance, in the UK, building on the same components. We discussed it quite early. Okay, Home Assistant is a good basis for both of us. And there grew the idea of having a European project to really start with fundamentally good, solid technological basis, a new ecosystem for communities. And so the REScoop VPP project was this really this goal of building, combining front-runner energy communities and create the most advanced community-driven smart building ecosystem for energy communities. So next, please, Roland. The REScoop VPP project brought together out of these discussions different cooperatives. You see Carbon Coop, for instance, Enercoop, Energent, EcoPower, Som Energia, all big energy cooperatives. We have Snap as coordinator. We ourselves are technical coordinators. And then REScoop.eu, Bündnis Bürgerenergie, but also two universities, Ghent University and the University of Ljubljana, all together with the same goal that what we are doing in this project really is a foundation to build further on. Of course, it's not easy, so we have to start with good foundations that could have a future if we all work further on it. So quickly, let me show what we're doing. The essence of it is you cannot build smart homes without integrating legacy equipments, existing equipments, new equipments. They're all from different manufacturers. They have all different protocols. There is no way that we have one standard at this moment. So we need a gateway that can connect and talk with these different equipments in the house. For us, the main flexibilities in a house are still PV, electrical batteries, EV chargers, and also thermal storage. And an important one is the heat pumps with thermal buffers, or the house with floor heating as buffer, for instance. So these are the most important, let's say, what we call primary control level. The most important equipments in a house we want to connect through a gateway, which we call the coffee box, community flexibility box. This is this Raspberry Pi, still cheap, very cheap equipment. And I will explain in minutes more on the software side, but this acts as the gateway, the connection with the community, which we call the tertiary control level, where are the community tools, the online part of the system, with all kinds of links. What we want to do with the community is build a safe haven where the people can store their own data safely, and where all the consents to connect your data with the energy market, with other parties, this is where it's organized in the community, so that people know they have a trustable party where they can start their journey within the energy markets. So next, please. The coffee box itself, I will not go into detail, but to give you an idea on which components we are building, you see the top left, coffeebox.io is the online community. In the middle, we have the coffee box. It has a centrally data bus. It's just a way of getting messages from one system to another system. All the small little systems are connected through a data bus. And you see on the Home Assistant, in the middle of the coffee box, this is a really important component. This is a very big open source home automation system. To give you an idea, more than 7,000 people already worked on it, maybe more now. And they have almost 2,000 integrations. So this is the foundation of integration. This is where we use this open source technology to get different systems connected. And from there, we are building other components that are missing, that are more on the level of smart energy control. Components like SunSpec, OCPP, to connect EV chargers, to connect inverters. And we have a concept of coffee cookies, which are small, also open source hardware components we are developing, for instance, to connect heat pumps and digital meters. So on the next slide, a quick example. On the left, you see a Flemish digital meter. You see beneath the digital meter a small little coffee cookie. This is to interface to get the data from the digital meter wirelessly to the coffee box. On top of it, the white box is just the coffee box, the Raspberry Pi. And down on the left, you see the SG Ready cookie. And this is the connection for typical SG Ready Smart Grid Ready interface is a typical interface for heat pumps in the field, and it's a hardware integration you need for this one. And there we connect a heat pump, and we get it connected also to the coffee box. On the right, you see a local dashboard on top. It's a Home Assistant dashboard that gives you already a view of what is happening of energy in your house. It's also the dashboard where you can manage the connections. And on the down on the right, you see the first iteration of the online dashboard. So we get the data nearly real time to the cloud, so where we can get it connected to the community and further into the energy market. In the next, let's talk about intelligence, because you first have to start, of course, with integrating hardware, making sure you can talk with it. Then you can also bring data to the cloud, but that's still data. So where are we, do we want to go in terms of intelligence? Yeah, the first thing is, if you have PV system, you want to get as much as self-consumption as possible. Now, the second one on the next slide is an important one. self-consumption is what everybody wants, but at the same time, we're evolving to dynamic tariffs, to prices of energy that are always changing, are nearly real time. You have to really follow it up. And of course, we want to automate it. And actually, the PV of your own house is also an energy, is also available energy with also a price. You invested in hardware, you might sell your injection at a certain price, so it also has a price. So our goal is actually to combine the dynamic tariff of your supplier or of your community. So the energy you buy in and you sell have their prices. We want to combine it with the price of the PV system and bring it to a future price, what we call the future price matrix. So we know at every moment how much energy is available at what price. And this will be the basis for a local price-based controller that will schedule different devices. And in the first time, the most important device in terms of energy is your heat pump, because your electrical battery, your EV charger have other options of using injection, for instance. So a heat pump is the first order of control for us. And so we're building right now in the project the local price-based controller that could schedule different devices like the heat pump, maybe block your battery. Also, we're looking into what to do with EV chargers. And so this scheduler should be able to schedule the different devices and then, of course, operate them without losing the warranty, of course, using interfaces that are by the developers of the technology are approved. And so from there have local price-based control. On the next one, we have the explicit demand-side response. So you understand we have first a local price-based control, which is continuously what we call more implicit demand-side response. On the other side, we, as a community, you want to be able maybe from a distance control at certain moments your community. This is what we call then explicit demand-side response. So the idea is from a distance, you get a signal to the coffee box and it blocks your battery or your heat pump for a certain time, or the other way around maybe, and you start injecting at full speed. Different options are possible, but this is not continuously. It's sometimes during the year you want maybe to have specific controls from the community and for certain services. The next one, please. To look quickly at the community portal, what we are developing from the ground up is the community is providing these coffee boxes. We see as a business opportunity, communities providing the boxes. So we need the provisioning service to make sure that these boxes get to the people, get enrolled, get connected to the community. I will not go into detail because the time is up. But next one. The first part of our project was really making sure the coffee boxes get connected, the data is stable, and data is coming to the crowd. During the project we are working now, we developed a tariff management, so the community can provide different kind of tariffs, the dynamic tariff, a fixed tariff, a block tariff. This is possible already. Insights in the community metrics we're building, so individual data is coming into the cloud, and now we're working on the aggregated metrics, and then we evolve towards the smart communities. And so on the next slide, the smart communities need forecasting, so we need to make sure that we see as a community how we are evolving the consumption, the production of the community, what do we expect in the next time, maybe 1 day, maybe 3 days. And the next one, so we can really go into self-sufficiency as communities, because I think this is the end goal. You want to be more independent as communities. You want to have transparency. You want to improve collective self-consumption. So the available own production, you want to use it optimally. You might want to share energy. You want to better use the available green energy in the grids, maybe from a distance or not too far. if you have your own energy, you also want to operate in the real-time energy market. And it's not only maybe selling, but also, if needed, to import energy at the best price possible. And if on top of that, you still have some flexibility and you really have the possibility to provide grid services, you might sell as a community these grid services. And so what we are doing with this community tools is really build the software framework to enable at the end all these different services. So next. Just quickly, the docs.coffeebox.io is where the coding guidelines and documentations are, because the Coffeebox is open source. And on the next one, the information about our API, it will grow. It's of course an ongoing project, but these are two places where you can find more information, and of course on the project website REScoop.eu. Thank you very much.
Okay, so then I will conclude on the final part about the existing challenges. My name is Laura van den Berge. I'm a PhD researcher at the Technical University of Eindhoven. My research is about the role of energy communities in the energy system and their potential for the energy transition. Next slide, please. I want to start with showing you this figure that I adjusted from a colleague of mine, which is about how transitions can unfold. A transition can unfold when the current system destabilizes and when alternatives are being developed. And these alternatives, these are radical innovations that are radically different from how the current incumbent system works. And as such, they really rethink the current system. Examples of this are community energy, virtual power plants, smart energy systems. But in order, although these alternatives are growing and further maturing, there are still quite some challenges that exist before they really gain a critical mass to transform the current system into a new one. Next slide, please. And I specifically want to focus on one of the aspects of the incumbent system, namely the markets. Roland already explained how these energy communities can participate in markets by offering new services, performing new activities, and exploring new business models. Examples are the local energy supply, energy sharing, flexibility provision, portfolio optimization, or the support for the optimization, etc. But really, there are still a lot of challenges to do that. And also Luc and Vincent already talked about how virtual power plants can assist in offering these new services. And they explained about the technology, but actually it is more than just a technological question, and there are more challenges than only providing a smart technology and creating a virtual power plant. Next slide, please. And I want to focus more on these other aspects. So for that, I want to share with you the results of my research, which is about the impact of market organization and thus the market design on community participation in the electricity markets. And for that, I looked at different dimensions and sub-dimensions that define how markets are organized. So first of all, you have the actors, then the resources, and also the institutions. I will not be able to go in detail and talk about how all of these dimensions create challenges, but also opportunities. So I will just pick a few out, but you can later contact me or ask questions about the other dimensions. We are also creating a crash course about how the markets are organized and how this impacts communities. So you can also read about that. It will be soon published on the REScoop website. Next slide, please. So for the research, I specifically focused on the Dutch and the Flemish electricity markets, and I studied 18 case studies of the more mature energy communities that are already active in the market or that are planning to be active in the market. For the first I mentioned, the market actors, we saw that there are quite some market power issues. For example, in the balancing markets and the reserve power markets, there are actually only a few market participants present. These participants, they are very large, so they have quite a lot of market power, and they, as such, they can also manipulate the prices. Then in other markets, we see that the incumbent actors, they can exploit learning economies because they already built quite some market knowledge and experience that they can use for developing new activities. And they can also exploit economies of scale because of their big size. And this is, of course, quite a challenge for communities to compete with these actors and to be on these markets. Next slide, please. The other dimension is about the market resources. So in order to participate on the markets, it is of course very important that you have your renewable energy and also some flexible assets. Concerning the renewable energy, we saw that it is become increasingly difficult to implement new projects because of increased competition for these projects. And this is especially the case when energy communities don't really have a specific working area, but mainly operate in multiple regions. And in that case, larger energy communities often win the tenders and often continue with the project, whereas the smaller ones are left behind. And this can even create tensions between the energy communities themselves. There are also other aspects that make it more difficult to implement more renewable energy, such as the auctioning system for support, but I will not go into that. Another aspect which is also really important, which Luc already explained a little bit as well, is that there is not really a business case yet for these new activities, and also not for the flexible assets. So this is also really a challenge that needs to be overcome. And then finally, we also see that, well, infrastructure is, you can leave the figure. Yes, thank you. Infrastructure is quite expensive and complex to build and maintain. And I want to show you this by showing this figure. On the right side, you can see the market infrastructure, which is often built and maintained by the market operators themselves. But in order to be active on these markets, you need your own supporting infrastructure. So you need to connect to these markets. You need to have your energy management system, a communication software, and your flexible assets. This is an example of how the balancing markets are organized. So you need all of this supporting infrastructure in order to be active on the markets. And this is very expensive and complex to build. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have the market institutions. And this institutional dimension really is about all the rules and regulations that exist in markets. And there are actually quite a lot of market rules that are very difficult for communities to comply to. You have the minimum bid sizes that are required on the wholesale and on the balancing markets that also require quite large volumes that communities often don't have. There are all kinds of license requirements for supply, for trade on platforms. And all these institutions really make it very difficult for the communities. Next to all the general market rules and regulations, it's also important for communities to have insights in how to do business on the markets and how to perform the activities. And for that, it is important to have some kind of tech knowledge that you can really perform or develop adequate bidding strategies, and that you know what you're doing. And this kind of experience is something that communities often lack, and that market incumbent actors already possess. Yeah, next slide, please. But what can these communities do about that? Because there are quite some challenges, but there are also ways to deal with it. For example, one strategy that communities often deploy is a growth strategy in order to, for example, deal with the minimum bid size in markets, also to have a viable business case and exploit economies of scale and have lower costs. But there are some risks connected to this strategy. And one risk is the risk of losing the initial community values. There is this interesting paper of Thomas Bouwens that explains and explores the fact that when a community is growing, that actually it attracts another type of investors, and that these investors are more interested in the financial gains and the growth of the community rather than in the environmental or the social values. So you can really see then a change from within. And this is something that communities need to be aware of, that if they grow, that they don't lose their own identity in the process, and that they can still connect to the local communities. Another risk is the impact on their transformative power for the energy transition, because when you grow and try to fit in and participate in the current system, there is this risk that you adjust too much, that you also adjust your business model too much, and that you then don't really bring this radical innovation anymore that you were initially trying to bring. Another strategy is diversification towards new activities. And this can, for example, be when an energy community wants to supply their own energy to their local members. They can also think about supplying heat, or be involved in flexibility provision in order to gain or have benefits from a shared infrastructure, shared resources, so lower costs and economies of scale. But this also implies the same risk as a growth strategy. Another strategy can be creating new markets. And this means that you're not focusing on participation in the existing markets, but that you create something entirely new. For example, creation of a peer-to-peer market. Well, this is very radical, and this can really bring a lot of changes. But it also holds a lot of challenges, because when you create an entirely new market, you have to set up the infrastructure, you need to set up the rules, align expectations between actors. So this is a lot of work. And then finally, there is a strategy of aggregation and collaboration. Next slide, please. And I want to explain it to you through the following figures. So communities, well, what we see nowadays is that, for example, smaller communities already collaborate with, for example, a larger community or with a third party in order to be present on the market. We see this, for example, when energy communities want to supply their local energy to their community, that they are collaborating with a green energy supplier, but could also be the case that they collaborate with a cooperative supplier. And this type of collaboration can be for many activities and business models. So not only for supply, but also, for example, for flexibility provision. Next slide, please. If we take this model to the next level, then we see that new structures are also emerging, which is a structure of the cooperative of cooperatives. And that means that, well, the central energy management system or the central customer relation system is not owned anymore by this one third party or by this large community, but really owned by all the participating members. And this can create many advantages. We see that this new structure is already emerging in the Netherlands, and also in Flanders, there's quite a call for creating such a structure. Next slide, please. This cooperative of cooperatives has some advantages, namely economies of scale, so lower costs. You have full ownership and control by the community, so no dependence from profit-seeking and commercial third parties, and it's applicable for a lot of activities and business models. The downside is that you need many participating communities in order to really exploit the advantages. This is called the network effect. So the more communities, the better the model works. And since it's now still in an emerging phase, we see that communities are not very eager to participate because they don't really know this new type of structure, and they already have nice collaborations with other parties that they don't want to stop. Next slide, please. So with this, I want to conclude that we saw many opportunities for new services and new activities for renewable energy, and energy communities can also participate in this by using technology in a smart way. But there are still many challenges, not only to create this technology, but also some more institutional challenges given by, for example, the market context. There is this tension between how markets are organized and how communities work, but depending on the strategy that communities take, they can try to solve this tension, and these strategies also really influence the role communities will have in the future system, and also the impact for the energy transition. So it's really important to think well how to deploy the strategies and which strategies would work for the communities. Okay, and with that, I want to conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura, for the nice presentation and the foreview for this. And Dirk, do you want to take the word to introduce the panel discussion?
Yeah. Okay. So we prepared a few questions. Maybe the next slide. The first question we have for you, panelists, is: are community virtual power plants an opportunity to better cope with the current energy crisis? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, we'll give some feedback or some ideas. I think community virtual power plants definitely have the potential to, by shifting your demand towards, if you have dynamic prices, towards moments where energy is cheaper, then the impact of the current very high spot prices, electricity spot prices, will be definitely reduced. That's might be one example. If you invest in your own renewable production through solar, then you're way a little bit more independent, and you don't have the high negative impact of the current high electricity prices, and if you optimize the self-consumption, or even in the future collective self-consumption, you can improve it as well. So those are some examples how CVPP definitely CVPP concept can help cooperative members and members of CVPP concepts to reduce the impact of the current very high electricity spot prices that we face, at least here in Central Europe now.
Maybe I can add. So we have to think more about why do we have high prices? And for me, it's the energy crisis is a dependency crisis. We are too dependent on foreign oil and foreign energy for Europe. And so the big opportunity for communities is to work on independency and to be able to harvest the solar, wind energy here available, and also to be not only less dependent on, and I don't have to explain it this time, dependent on what kind of political providers of energy we need to be less dependent, but also on technology. We are a lot dependent on big tech companies. And so the CVPPs are opportunities to get on both sides less dependencies. And it's not today, of course, and it's something we have to work on the longer term. But I really think as Europe, we need to get this fixed.
Yeah, I just I agree with the other panelists. What I just want to add is that well, in my opinion, the C of the CVPPs is a very important factor well to cope with this crisis. I think we all agree that shifting or being flexible with your production and consumption can help you deal with the prices. But then again, there are also still a lot of people that don't really have the assets, and for that, the communities can really help them and empower these citizens, these households, to participate in such a more like technological configuration of virtual power plants. So for me, the biggest advantage or the biggest opportunity really lies in this community aspect, which is empowering the people and providing them also with the necessary knowledge and the assets to deal with this crisis.
Yeah, maybe we can go to the second question. Should cooperatives own their tools or collaborate with service providers? Maybe Vincent, you can start.
Yeah, you can imagine. So as I just said, a dependency, we are really dependent at this time on big tech companies, typically Chinese or US driven, capital driven, really intensive. That means it's not easy to, it's not easy. Roland, we lost the presentation. So the dependency on the big tech, if you talk about, do you want to own it? It's only possible, and then I agree with the presentation of Laura, if you do it collectively, and it will not be one little company that can do it, it will only be possible to be less dependent on these big tech companies if we do it also in a big tech community owned way. That means a secondary cooperative structure, maybe it will need a lot of capital. So that means the communities have to really want to become less dependent. Will it be from the first moment? No. So could you collaborate with service providers? Yes, of course you can do it, as long as you don't lock yourself in. And that's typically a problem if you start with some big tech technology. There is really a risk that you just never can get rid of it, or you're always dependent on it. And then you know, of course, that behind a big tech company is an economic model, a business model, and that it's profit driven, which is not per se bad, but you just have to know that you always will pay more and you will have to pay these profits for the capital. So that means that when you work with service providers, always you have to check what is the model behind. Can we become independent from it one day? And if we want to do it ourselves, can we make enough scale to make maybe with 20% of the efforts, 80% of the results ourselves, and keep the the software then in our own hands. And it's looking for the good balance between what can we do ourselves and where do we need others for. And maybe it's a shift from maybe buy-in in the beginning more from service providers, but getting more and more independent. And that's the long-term goal then, I think.
Some other panelists have to add something, looking at the time.
Yeah, just shortly, small cooperatives or energy communities such as Enerkent, yeah, we will never, or we don't have the possibility to own our own tools or develop it ourselves. So we will definitely, in the stage where we are now, we depend upon IT service providers. The question is, yeah, do you look to big companies or do you look to cooperative service providers where you have some impact on? The main thing is, such as Vincent said, is try to organize it in such a way that you don't organize lock-ins. Because the energy transition is just starting, so you will need to adapt your EMS system and your home tools the coming years, also to incorporate new type of heat pumps, new type of batteries, new type of inverters. And if you're locked in with one company whose main goal is to make money, then okay, you've got to be paying a lot.
Okay. Maybe the last question. How big can be the role of community-owned virtual power plants in a 100% RES energy system? A very broad question. What's our ambition? How do we see ourselves in the future? By 2050, I think that's the aim.
I think as energy cooperatives, we should have the ambition to try to organize as much as possible the available flexibility of our cooperative members, that we, at least at regional levels, try to have cooperative structures focusing on organizing the available flexibility and not to have the big players being able to take all that flexibility that's available. But that also, as a cooperative sector, we take up the role and we try to organize ourselves that we can valorize this flexibility in our own cooperative structure. So there, yeah, the sky is the limit, I should say, but it depends how much time and money we invest in this opportunity.
Someone else wants to add something? Laura?
Yes. Yeah. Responding on this, the sky is the limit. I think there are indeed a lot of opportunities for these energy communities, and like I said in my presentation, a lot will depend on the strategies that these communities develop and take. What the impact will be on the energy system and on the transition. On the other hand, I also think it's, well, when talking about the role of these communities, I also think it's important to really consider what these communities really want. I talked to quite a lot of communities and well, they say, okay, it's you can really have all of these kind of advantages for the system, for the society, but maybe, and they are still questioning it themselves, maybe we should try to stay closer to the citizens and focus on awareness raising of flexibility, on providing group purchasing for flexible assets, providing IT services to help the installation of such management systems and all the technical components that come with it. So this is really another type of role for these communities compared to all these these market activities that they can do. And I don't know how the system will look like in 2050. I think it would be very beneficial for like not only energy independency, but also for the households, their energy bills, to really give this large role to the community virtual power plants that then participate in markets. But on the other hand, since there are quite some risks of losing this local connection, maybe we should also keep in mind that through other, maybe more simple activities, these communities can play a role as well.
Okay. Maybe we should look now for questions from the audience. They've been quite so far. We still have 15 minutes officially. Please raise your hand. I don't really have an overview. But
Dirk, I think there's a question from Mathieu in the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, if we really need tools, can we develop low-tech energy sharing? Maybe one of the speakers can jump on this one.
Yeah, I can say for sure that we're looking for the cheapest and the most simple solution. And I'm really a believer of low-tech. Yeah? It all depends on how we see our consumption and our comfort and welfare in the future. Do we need everything we are buying and we are consuming? Do we all need it? And the simpler we make our life, or we can be happy in a more simple way of living, the more easy it will be to have low-tech solutions. But at the moment, you see that the inverse is true, that smart homes are very tech-driven houses. You need heat pumps, all kinds of EV chargers, different technology. And so it's not that easy to, I don't see how you could be energy sharing without any technology at the moment. You need data anyway, you need a way of billing, and you need systems that can cope with this available energy, which is of course not stable and not available all the time. And we don't see a possibility of having people all the time watching their energy and saying and controlling all the time all their systems. So yes, let's try to make it as low tech as possible, but at the moment now we're still looking for technological solutions. And maybe to add quickly, our goal could be that we don't need a coffee box at home. It could be all internet driven, but of course, the more you put in the cloud, you have the awareness of privacy and other issues and dependencies you might not want, but it's a possibility that or I see in a way that we're evolving in more cloud-based solutions. And then it's important as a community, you can provide a safe place for your members to connect to these internet-driven systems. I hope this was an answer to the question.
Yeah, I don't see another question. If you have one, please raise your hand or your voice. I don't see. No more questions. Tim B. Yeah, Tim, can you take the floor? Yeah.
Okay. Just quickly, and I'm sorry this was covered earlier. I had a time zone confusion and missed the beginning of the presentations. I'm looking into. I'm an academic at the Tyndall Centre in the University of Manchester, and looking at the financing of smart local energy systems and kind of cooperative and crowdfunding ways to do this. I'm wondering if you've had what your experience has been of raising finance for community-owned VPPs. Is it, compared to maybe other forms of community energy? Is it a big financial demand, or maybe not so difficult? And sort of how easy have you tried to go to citizens to get them to invest in a VPP project? And if so, how was it?
Yeah. Some Luc, maybe, yeah.
In our projects, the first step is to organize renewable production. So we found a lot of people who want to invest in solar production on their roofs. That's no problem. Currently in Flanders as well, a lot of people are investing as well in home batteries. And now through the energy crisis that we're facing now, there is a lot of interest and demand for heat pumps as well. So this is moving, but this is for the people who have the money, and that's a limited group of society, and lots of groups of society don't have the money, and they don't. They're not able to invest. So in that part, things are going into the good direction. But then in the home management system, the energy management system, the VPP technology, there, we first need to prove people that they can make some profit out of it. Before they will be able to invest it. And there, okay, we need the results of the REScoop VPP project to have a good and a proven concept and hardware with good IT support. And then we hope to be able to tell those people, look, if you pay 200 or 250 euros extra for a coffee box in your house, you will make more profit out of your own renewable production and your electricity consumption. And if you pay another 10 or 15 euros a year to an IT company who will maintain the project and actualize all the software, then you will gain more money than what you pay. That's the goal of the REScoop VPP project. And then if we can prove that this system works, I'm quite sure that at least the front runners who are investing now in their own homes, that they will also will want to invest in this technology as well. There is a huge demand and there is huge interest, but first we need to have a good, reliable product with a good support of it. So there, okay, I hope by the end of next year, if the REScoop VPP project is finished, that we are somewhere at a level that we can offer those products to our members.
Now, I want to add a bit, because from my side as technological developer, I understand that it will be anyway a bit like a startup. We will also need capital to invest in the product. So I'm afraid that I'm less optimistic, like, look, that it will be at the end of a project already a product. We will still need developments. We will need people be able to work on it. That means we need we have to get them paid, and it means that we will have to, if we think about a secondary cooperative structure, for instance, we need cooperatives willing to invest in this cooperative structure so that we have capital. Also, like an ordinary startup or another company, that we have financial means to further invest first, to make a loss, to lose money at the beginning, to make sure the product is at the level that people want to pay for it, and that it can be a company that really has a model, a self-sufficiency model. And then it's not again about profit, but it's about making sure that the business just is able to be self-sufficient. And so I'm afraid we still have to convince a lot of cooperatives to really put money on the table to get to a point that it's a real product for the market.
I see some people opened their camera. Remy and Tim. Tim, you have a question?
And that was me. That was my question. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Really interesting. So.
Maybe.
Remy?
Yeah, actually, I would have a little question. So maybe some of you remember me. I was last year a student at Erasmus University Rotterdam, and I wrote my master thesis on renewable energy cooperatives and their influence on community engagement and consumer engagement. So this is more from a social science perspective, I would say, but I would like to know, did you observe in your communities, the members of the cooperatives, some kind of change in behavior when the people start interacting with this this smart energy management system? Did you see maybe like some kind of a change in energy behavior, people like, for example, using less energy and this kind of elements? This is the question I will be interested in.
Vincent, maybe?
I was looking at Luc because he has, of course, a little
Luc.
more
No,
the members.
those aspects the tests we done were very technical on a very small scale, and those aspects were not followed up on. So we didn't measure it. It was also not the goal. There are a lot of projects in the past that have been focusing on change of behavior based on signals you send them, etc., etc. We really focused on engaging the people into the project and organizing an energy management system and automated actions. Not on behavioral change, and this we didn't measure as well during the project, so we don't have any results. But we can see subjectively that the people who are engaged, they just by visualizing all kind of production consumption data, people become more aware. That's quite clear by sharing all the new knowledge that you gain in the community. People become more aware as well. Energy crisis is helping as well, and they really try to look a little bit better when if they can do themselves certain kind of actions to improve their self-consumption, at least already in their own house. So, but we didn't measure any of those aspects during the project.
I think these aspects were covered in a previous project, Roland. That the consumption went down of them members of energy cooperatives. No.
This is a project I was not involved in. Are you talking about REScoop Plus?
Yeah, REScoop Plus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we
sorry, I'm going to come in from the off. I see a few questions or comments in the chat. There was a comment from Mathieu. I don't know, Mathieu, if maybe you want to take the floor for a second to explain your point. Then there was also a question from Guillaume at Some Surveys Energetics, who wanted to know something about the use and availability of the software used with Debian Linux on a Raspberry Pi device. If somebody knows how to answer this.
So this one will be for Vincent, but Mathieu maybe first, as I understood.
Yes, but so my point was to say what we noticed so far in our pilot projects, that the main barrier at the beginning is not like the rate of self-consumption at the collective level, but much to find people that are ready to take time of their free time to manage an energy community in administrative terms, like to find people, to mobilize them. And so in our opinion, when we speak about tools, we don't need to only focus on the technological aspect, even if at some point it's also needed. But we also have to focus on developing tools to help people to manage their own community as an organization, not the energy sharing as such. So that was not a question, that was more like a remark or a point.
Yeah, and we could show you examples of this. So there's software being developed, but also, for instance, if you look at the member of the federation in the UK, Energy for All, they're like a sort of umbrella cooperative of 29, let's say, project cooperatives. And so they make it very easy for a local community to run their local cooperative, because all the administration is done by the umbrella cooperative that services them. And so this might, because a lot of energy communities will be very small and focused on a pilot on a project, this might be a solution. So
maybe if I can quickly add because also Remy, the response on the previous question, for me, we always have to think about the core motivation of people. And if you see now also with the Putin crisis on energy, how we are addicted to the energy and things that is just logic to have all this energy available. That's the core motivation, that people understand that we need to get rid of this dependency. And then the organization of technology and organization of communities will be much easier if people are really motivated to get rid of this this fossil dependency. And that's still a problem. The people still are too much thinking as a right. I have the right to have fossil fuels wherever it comes from. And only then, when people are really ready to get rid of this right and this dependency, then the communities and the technology will be much easier to build and to get at a certain level we need.
Okay. Looking at the time, I think we have reached the end of this interesting discussion and presentations. As the president of REScoop.eu, I'm very glad I could participate in this because I know these projects are going on, but what is being developed, I now have more vision of it. I hope also the participants can see that we try together with our members, we try to develop tools, hardware, software that can serve all the members. And I think this is the way to go. And you can stay in contact with us. You can follow up on the projects we are engaging. If you look at our website, you can find the contact persons. And if you have questions, you can always ask them to us. So I see one new message. Yeah, some people thank us. So let's wrap up. See you soon. I hope next year we can see each other physically in Heerlen, if still the municipality wants to welcome us. And then we can, after a session like this, we can discuss further in person while eating something. Thank you for your attendance and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.